The sun blazed down on the lively streets of Montgomery, Alabama. Inside the polished marble walls of Haven Trust Bank, the quiet hum of conversation mixed with the rhythmic clatter of keyboards. The morning rush had subsided, and employees were settling into their routines, their professionalism filling the air. The tall glass doors swung open, and a man entered, his presence commanding, but understated. He was tall, his sharp features complemented by a tailored navy suit that spoke of refinement without ostentation. His name was Malcolm Avery, a name that meant little to those in the bank at that moment but would soon be unforgettable. Malcolm approached the nearest customer service desk with a polite smile and requested a simple transaction. Before the clerk could respond, a firm voice rang out across the room. "I'll handle this," said Gordon Brewer, the bank's manager, striding over with a tight-lipped smile that didn't quite meet his eyes. Known for his rigid demeanor and self-assigned role as the bank's gatekeeper, Gordon exuded an air of authority tinged with arrogance. Sizing Malcolm up with a glance, Gordon's tone carried an unspoken assumption. "We have certain policies here," he said. "I'll need proper identification before we can proceed." Malcolm's expression remained composed. He calmly handed over his ID and waited. Gordon inspected it longer than necessary, his skepticism visible. "What's the purpose of your visit today?" Gordon asked, his tone sharper now. "I'd like to withdraw funds from my account," Malcolm replied, his voice steady and firm. Gordon glanced at the ID again, then back at Malcolm. "I'm sorry, but we can't process this without additional verification. You understand? It's just policy." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "Policy or something else?" The room grew noticeably quieter as curious glances were exchanged. Malcolm didn't flinch, his silence putting the onus back on Gordon. Gordon cleared his throat, his voice rising as if to assert dominance. "If you don't have the required verification, I suggest you return when you do." "I see," Malcolm said calmly, his words laced with subtle meaning. "You're refusing to serve me then?" "I didn't say that," Gordon shot back, his face flushing. "But we take fraud very seriously here. I'm sure you understand." Malcolm met Gordon's gaze without wavering. "More than you realize," he replied. Without raising his voice, Malcolm reached into his pocket and retrieved a sleek black phone. Dialing quickly, he spoke in a measured tone. "This is Malcolm. Could you send someone to Haven Trust Bank? There seems to be a misunderstanding." After hanging up, he turned back to Gordon with a faint, knowing smile. "Let's wait a moment." Minutes passed, though they felt longer. The room's atmosphere was tense, with employees and customers alike pretending to focus on other things while sneaking glances. "You can't expect special treatment," Gordon said at last, folding his arms. His tone carried a note of condescension. "Rules are rules." Malcolm's expression remained impassive. "I'm not asking for special treatment, just the same treatment as anyone else." This statement visibly irked Gordon. "You people always think—" He stopped mid-sentence, his face reddening as he realized his slip. Malcolm's eyes sharpened. "You people?" "I meant customers who don't follow proper procedures," Gordon stammered, his discomfort palpable. By now, the entire room was watching. One of the clerks whispered to a colleague, "Do you think he'll call the police?" The colleague shrugged. "Gordon loves throwing his weight around, but this guy seems different." Gordon, trying to appear busy, picked up a clipboard and pretended to study it. "If you can't provide additional proof of your account, I'll have to ask you to leave." Malcolm gave a faint, ironic smile. "You're very confident in your judgment, Mr. Brewer." "That's my job," Gordon snapped, "to ensure the bank operates with integrity." "Integrity," Malcolm repeated, his tone heavy with irony. He glanced around the room. "Is this how Haven Trust Bank defines integrity? By making baseless assumptions?" Gordon's expression hardened. "Sir, if you continue disrupting business, I'll have to ask you to leave." At that moment, the bank's glass doors opened, and a tall man in a gray suit entered. His presence was commanding, his stride purposeful. "Mr. Avery," the man greeted Malcolm, his tone deferential. "I came as quickly as I could." The room froze. Gordon's eyes darted between Malcolm and the newcomer, his confidence faltering. "Mr. Avery?" Gordon repeated, his voice unsteady. Yes, the man in the gray suit confirmed, turning to Gordon. Malcolm Avery, the principal owner of Haven Trust Bank. The words hit Gordon like a thunderclap. His clipboard slipped from his hands, clattering onto the counter. You own the bank? Gordon stammered, barely able to form the words. Malcolm's gaze was steady. That's correct. And here I am being denied service by the very people entrusted to uphold this institution's values. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room as employees and customers exchanged wide-eyed looks. The once bustling bank was now silent, save for the weight of realization settling on Gordon's shoulders. The sun bore down on the vibrant city of Montgomery, Alabama. Inside the marble-lined Haven Trust Bank, the hum of keyboards and quiet conversations blended seamlessly, signaling the end of the morning rush. Employees dressed in sharp business attire had settled into their routines when a man stepped through the towering glass doors. He was tall, with chiseled features and an understated confidence that drew attention. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, his appearance reflected a man who valued precision without excess. His name was Malcolm Avery, a name unfamiliar to most in the building, though it was about to become unforgettable. Malcolm approached the nearest customer service desk with a polite smile. Before the clerk could respond to his request, a voice cut through the air like a whip. "I'll handle this," barked Gordon Brewer, the branch manager. Gordon's stern expression and curt tone radiated authority, though it leaned toward condescension. Known among his staff as a stickler for control, Gordon relished opportunities to flex his authority, especially when his personal biases went unchecked. Gordon walked over, his smile tight and insincere, his eyes scanning Malcolm in a way that betrayed judgment. "Sir, we have certain policies here," Gordon began, his tone laced with distrust. "I'll need proper identification before we proceed." Without missing a beat, Malcolm calmly slid his ID across the counter. Gordon picked it up, scrutinizing it longer than necessary. His skepticism was apparent, and his tone sharpened. "What is the nature of your visit today?" Malcolm's voice was even. "I'd like to withdraw funds from my account." Gordon's frown deepened as he inspected the ID again, clearly searching for a reason to deny the request. "I'm afraid we'll need additional verification. It's just policy," he said, his words almost accusatory. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "Policy? Or something else?" The air in the bank grew heavy. Nearby employees and customers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension. Malcolm remained composed, his calm demeanor contrasting with Gordon's growing agitation. "If you don't have the required documentation," Gordon pressed, "you'll need to come back another time." "I see," Malcolm replied, his tone steady but charged. "So you're refusing to assist me?" "I didn't say that," Gordon retorted quickly, his face reddening. "But fraud prevention is a serious matter." Malcolm said nothing, merely pulling out his sleek black phone. He made a quick call, his voice calm but firm. "This is Malcolm Avery. Could you send someone to Haven Trust Bank? There's been a misunderstanding." As Malcolm ended the call, he turned back to Gordon with an enigmatic smile. "Let's wait." The minutes that followed were tense. The room was silent, save for the occasional shuffle of papers or a forced cough. Gordon fidgeted, trying to maintain an air of authority but faltering under the weight of Malcolm's unyielding gaze. Finally, the bank's glass doors opened. A tall man in a gray suit entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. He strode toward Malcolm, his expression respectful. "Mr. Avery," he greeted, "I came as quickly as I could." The room collectively froze. Gordon's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Mr. Avery?" he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," the man in the gray suit confirmed. "Malcolm Avery, the principal owner of Haven Trust Bank." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Gordon's clipboard slipped from his hands, clattering onto the counter. His face went pale as the realization set in. You own the bank," he stammered, his voice trembling. Malcolm's gaze was unwavering. "That's correct. And yet, here I am being refused service by someone representing my institution. Care to explain?" Gordon's confidence crumbled, his posture collapsing under Malcolm's words. I didn't realize that I own the bank, Malcolm interrupted, or that your actions would come under scrutiny. The man in the gray suit cleared his throat. Mr. Avery, would you prefer to address this in the boardroom? Malcolm shook his head. This discussion happens here, where everyone can hear it. Gordon swallowed hard, his hands trembling. Malcolm turned to him. As the manager of this branch, you're the face of this institution. Your actions reflect our values, or lack thereof. Today, you've shown me something deeply troubling about how we treat our customers. Gordon stammered, searching for an explanation. I was just following policy. I didn't mean... You didn't mean what? Malcolm's voice rose slightly, sharp enough to cut through the room. And to let your bias guide your actions. To deny me the same respect and service you'd give someone else? Gordon's face burned with shame, and he looked at the floor. I made a mistake, he mumbled. A mistake, Malcolm repeated. And what about the people who suffer because of those mistakes? Do you think they just forget? Or do they carry it with them, another reminder that they're treated as less? The room was silent, the weight of Malcolm's words hanging heavy. Employees and customers alike watched intently, their expressions ranging from discomfort to agreement. Malcolm turned to the gray-suited man. I want mandatory training on bias and respect implemented across all branches immediately, and a direct channel for employees and customers to report incidents like this. Consider it done, the man replied. Malcolm faced Gordon one last time. You're suspended pending review. Whether you stay with this institution will depend on your willingness to confront your biases and take responsibility for your actions. Gordon's shoulders slumped, defeat etched across his face. I understand, he muttered. Malcolm addressed the room. Every person who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. That's not just policy, it's human decency. If anyone here has ever felt otherwise, I want to hear about it. This ends today. A young clerk, Aaron, hesitated before speaking. Sir, how do you stay so calm in situations like this? Malcolm smiled faintly. Because calmness often speaks louder than anger. But make no mistake. The atmosphere in the bank grew lighter as Malcolm exhaled deeply, his steady composure radiating authority and grace. He stepped forward, ensuring his voice carried to every corner of the room. What happened here today, he began, his tone calm but resolute, isn't just an isolated incident. It's a reminder of how easily unchecked biases can seep into our actions, often unnoticed until they harm someone, and harm they do. His gaze shifted across the room, resting on faces that showed a mixture of guilt, reflection, and understanding. We live in a world where far too often people are judged by appearances, assumptions, or stereotypes. It's not just unfair, it's harmful. It stifles opportunities, creates division, and chips away at our humanity, the very essence of what connects us. Turning to Daniels, the man in the gray suit, Malcolm continued, I want Haven Trust to live up to the values we claim to uphold: respect, fairness, and opportunity for all. Starting today, we'll set an example, not just for ourselves, but for the entire industry. Daniels nodded solemnly. Consider it done, Mr. Avery. We'll act immediately. A voice broke the silence. A middle-aged woman in a floral blouse stepped forward hesitantly. Thank you, she said, her tone trembling but sincere, for standing up and saying what needed to be said. It means a lot, especially to those of us who've faced similar situations. Malcolm offered her a kind smile. Thank you for sharing that. Change begins with conversations like this one. He turned back to Gordon Brewer, who stood quietly at the edge of the room, his shoulders slumped under the weight of the moment. Malcolm's voice softened but remained firm. Mr. Brewer, you made a serious mistake today, but mistakes, as painful as they are, can also be opportunities to grow. I hope you'll reflect on this and commit to doing better, not just for yourself, but for everyone who might encounter you in the future. Gordon nodded slowly, the humility in his expression more profound than any words he could muster. I will, sir, he whispered. I promise. Malcolm shifted his focus back to the room. "To everyone here," he said, his voice carrying the weight of both conviction and hope, "let this moment serve as a reminder. Treat every person you encounter with respect, regardless of their background or appearance. That's what truly matters. Not wealth, not status, but how we treat one another." With those final words, Malcolm picked up his briefcase and walked toward the doors. As he exited, the silence in the room was filled with murmurs of reflection and admiration. Inside the bank, something fundamental had shifted. A collective reckoning that left no one untouched. Outside, life in the city continued as usual. But inside the hearts of those present, Malcolm's words resonated deeply. Employees exchanged glances, inspired to reflect on their own actions. Customers left the bank with stories to tell about the remarkable man who had made them see the world, and themselves, a little differently. Gordon, suspended from his role, spent the evening wrestling with his thoughts. Malcolm's words echoed in his mind, each one striking deeper than the last. Yet amid the shame, a spark of determination ignited. He vowed to confront the prejudices he had long ignored and begin the hard work of becoming a better person. Erin, the young clerk, also felt transformed. Inspired by Malcolm's poise and conviction, she resolved to be a voice for inclusion in her branch, advocating for change not just through policies but through daily actions. As for Malcolm, he returned to his office that evening, not with a sense of triumph but with quiet resolve. He gazed out at the cityscape, knowing that the fight against bias and discrimination was far from over. Changing the culture of one bank was just a small piece of a much larger puzzle. Yet he allowed himself a moment of hope, because change, no matter how small, always matters. The camera fades to black, and Malcolm's voice echoes with quiet strength. Every choice we make shapes the world we live in. Choose fairness. Choose justice. Above all, choose to see people for who they truly are, not who you assume them to be. Message: judgment limits. Respect empowers. Together we can do better. Like, comment, and subscribe for more Black support.